Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. Today we're looking at this new super Gloomdredger tank that I've made. With pulsed cannons, pulsed lasers, and Link is completely invisible inside of this spring cage. Later on in the video I'll show you exactly how to make each of these. The Gloomdredger chassis that you see here, you can get at the abandoned Kakariko mine in the depths. I really like it. It's not necessary, you could use railing if you wanted to. This is not a early game tank at all. This is very much an end game tank with some tricky building techniques that I'll show you how to do throughout the video. It requires a bit of patience, and it will take you a bit of time to get to an end product like this. But with that, I wanted to improve my last tank, so I'm going to show you throughout the video the steps that I took to get to this state. My first idea was to use a U-block. If you're unfamiliar, this is a material that you can get in the depths at the right leg depot, and my goal here was to replace this minecart on the top, make something look a little better, maybe a little bit smaller. This is what the U-block looks like. It's indestructible by Lionel roars, and while Link is standing inside, he's pretty impervious to explosions. So I wanted to attach this to the front of the Gloomdredger chassis, and then I'm gonna point some cannons towards Link and see if I can knock him off the steering stick. This is just for protection against my turret accidentally aiming too close, so then I don't accidentally knock Link off while he's driving. Here, I'll grab it and see if I get knocked off. And great. So Link's protected with this direction. We're gonna point the cannon in a different direction, straight towards Link now, and see what this does. This is a chance to explode over or under. Yep, and it knocked Link off. So maybe it went over, so we're gonna attach another one on top and see if this knocks Link off. So here's what it looks like. You can see there's still a little gap on one side. So still got him, and it got him from under. I do a couple more attempts here. You can see that sometimes it doesn't knock him off, but I think at just the right angle, it does. Here it doesn't, and then the next shot will knock him off, even though it seems like he's fully protected. That's because the Yiga are not good at right angles. So we gotta try something else. I looked at this minecart, fits the size pretty well, but this doesn't really provide gaps for Link to get through, and I don't think it's going to be explosion proof from the side, and those holes are definitely going to allow arrows to get through and hit Link, so I end up not going with this. My next attempt was to press the U-block down into the chassis, because it's just about the right size. And you'll see here, I've slowly raised up the block with Ultra Hand, and then I'm going to recall so it goes back down in and presses it down there. But you see that the Ultra Hand attachment doesn't work. It's not able to attach while inside of that chassis. And when I try to attach it, it just pops up further and further, so it's just slightly too large to fit in there. It was very close. I would have loved to do that. Instead, we're going to use the spring cage. This was a technique developed by uCylinder7, where you clip through the back spring, you're invincible and invisible. And to get out, you just slide out. It has a camera glitch associated with it, like you see here. So one way that we can try to fix that is to use a vertical alignment. Same sort of concept, where you will clip through the top spring. And as far as we know so far, there is no camera glitch associated with this orientation, but it does have a couple drawbacks. So in case you like this design and you want to use it, it's very viable. See how Link is inside now, so he's invisible and invincible. But when you let go and try to get out, it ejects you and you land on the spikes. So you get some damage. And then it's really hard to get back onto the control stick way up there. You can kind of climb, but angles make it tough. So I'm going to try and figure out a way to make it horizontal. What you have to do for this, though, is the two springs can't be the same height. If they're the same height, then they'll both just kind of push closed and Link will just be in between them, like this. So you need the back spring to be higher than the front spring. That way the bottom of the control stick will slide under the bottom of the back spring's head, and then Link's body will clip through. So a way that we're going to make that back spring higher is with a technique called stake nudging. The way to do this is to attach your build with a stake to the ground, and then take a second stake and attach it to whatever object you're trying to pull away from the body of the build. Like that. Now we're going to auto build, rebuild the structure, and then repeat that process. That's why it's called nudging. It's just little adjustments at a time. So here we auto build, we'll put it back into the floor, detach that stake, realign the body into the ground, and now we're going to nudge further. So you want to hold it a little bit away from the object you're nudging, and then hit attach, and it's going to pull that away. See how it pulled the spring away from the body a little bit there? The reason that we keep auto building is because auto build doesn't remember that tension from attaching the second stake. So we make a little bit of a gap from attaching a second stake, but then when we auto build it again, it doesn't remember that tension, but it does remember the position. By doing many iterations, we can make these small adjustments that gradually move objects wherever you want. And this is a very powerful technique because you can do it at basically any angle that you want. So you're not limited to those 45-degree rotations that the Ultra Hand gives you. Now you can do it at single-degree rotations. And you can make minute adjustments as you go. So as you're watching me do this process, you can see that the spring is getting further and further away from the chassis. And here I'm making a small sideways adjustment to center it again. It just requires a little bit of patience, but it's a pretty easy process. Now that I've got that nudged, I'm going to attach the control stick and see if I will clip through the back spring. Boom. There we go. Clip through the back spring, and then if you let go of the control stick, it'll just eject you out the side. And then you have to do a little dance to get back on and get it reset. That's not too bad. Let's check that Link is actually impervious to cannons. So this should be knocking Link off the control stick. But clearly, he's invincible while he's inside this spring. Let's try a different position, just to make sure. Attach it right there. Clip through the spring. This should be knocking him off. Like, it's hitting him. One more. We'll do it from the back. There's nothing in between the cannon and Link here. And boom. So if you've got that figured out, save the game right now. So that way you have a good configuration of the spring cage before we do anything else to the tank. This next section, I'm going to work on the front drill, but just to save you some time, you don't need to use the front drill. The front wheel will work just great in breaking zonite deposits. But if you like the look of it, I just want to show you how I did it. It's going to require some stake nudging again. And you see that we're up at the water temple. And that's because you want to be in a low gravity situation. Since we already have stake nudged the spring cage, we want to keep that orientation as best as possible. So be in low gravity while you're doing more stake nudges, because every time you auto build something, gravity slightly sags components down, so it could mess up the spring cage. So you see up here, we're doing the same process. We're doing stake nudging, pulling this motor and drill gradually further and further away from the body, just to give a little bit of space. That way we don't have to use the stake like I used in the previous iteration of this tank. We got stake. Nudge 4. Nudge 5. And now we check, do we still clip through the spring? And we do. And is there enough room for that front tire to rotate? Here I was like, I wonder if I put a beam on the front, would that do anything? Kind of fun. But yep, so the drill spins, and our spring cage still works. I decided that it seemed like the front wheel was rubbing a little bit on something, so I wanted to do a couple more nudges to bring the drill out further. So 2 more nudges, and then I think we're good. A little hard to tell. But anyway, come on down to Cheese Puff Motors. We've got lots of spikes. Now on to the fun stuff. So I figured out how to pulse cannons. And to do this, I was doing a test with just an enemy in a cage, and I slowly moved the angle closer and closer to 0 degrees. I noticed that the bokoblin was targeting me, so I put a cart in the way so it can't see me anymore. You can see it pulsing, but the angle's a little too big. So we make the angle slightly smaller. Okay. Ooh, we're right on the cusp. So the bokoblin's moving around a little bit, and that slightly adjusts the angle. But let's make the angle slightly smaller. There we go. We'll do it from the other side now. There we go. So I'm gonna guess somewhere between 0 and 5 degrees. And in a configuration I have later on that works, like you see here, a 2-degree angle was about the optimum angle for what I found for a pulsed cannon. This is without any weight on that top head. So if you add 1 to 3 cannons on the top there, the angle slightly changes. And here is my turret configuration. I'll show you how to build this later, but just wanted to give you an idea for how the pulse cannon works. And we see here that maybe it's like a 0 to 5 degree downward angle with that weight on the top. So it's a very, very small angle, requires 1 or 2 nudges, and this is what mine looks like when I was able to get successful pulsed cannons. Let's do a field test with this pulsed cannon. So I'm attaching my turret to the top of the spring. I'll show you how to make this turret later in the video, but for right now, I just wanted to go out and test this and see whether what I was doing was even right. I just wanted to see, does the turret work on top of the spring here? Is there any mobility issues, like if the aiming head looks somewhere and then knocks some pieces off, then we need to readjust the position. Hey, there's some pulsed cannons. Seems like the left beam is a little more continuous than the right one, so its position's a little bit off. Let's see if we can get some pulsed cannons here. So it's not quite at the right angle. Oh, there's some. Let's try again on a different enemy. Sometimes the cannons hitting the lasers, and the lasers seem to be hitting the feet of the enemy. There's some pulsed cannons. Wow, that was a good rate. Yeah, looks like later on I'll need to figure out how to get the beams to not hit the enemy feet. Wow, that lightning. I didn't record it, but at the next enemy camp, the aiming head looked straight up and knocked the side heads off. So we need to make a floating turret. We're gonna do this again up at the water temple where there's low gravity. That way you don't affect the nudged components like the spring cage. Get rid of tooling. I've attached the aiming head upside down on top of the spring, and now we're just gonna nudge it up and away from the spring, so that way it can look around without risking hitting any of the trigger heads or the beams or the cannons off of the turret. So this will require a few nudges. This one's probably the most nudge intensive, but this is probably a little overkill what I do. It's probably floating up a little too... It doesn't need to be as high as it is. So you don't need to do as many nudges as I'm showing. Just give it some space, otherwise you may risk hitting some components off. Remember to align the body vertically before you attach the stretching stake. Otherwise you may introduce some weird angles. Here I am introducing a angle to the aiming head, but you'll see in a couple nudges after I brought it out far, here I start to just bring it vertically. So this will realign it vertically. There we go. Pretty good. Since the head, the construct head's head and feet are pretty stretchy already, nudging them requires a bit more work than the rigid structures like the spring you saw earlier, or the motor. Those nudged pretty far with each nudge, and you see the head's not moving a lot. But little by little, we'll get it. Alright, a couple more vertical nudges and we'll be done. My goal was to have a gap about the size of a construct head between the construct head and the spring that it's attached to. Alright, this is our last nudge. Make sure it's straight. And of course, put the wheel back on and make sure the spring cage still works. With 13 nudges, gravity may have caused that back spring to move a little bit over those auto builds, so we want to make sure that our spring cage still works. And great, it does. So this would be another good point to save your game. As a side note, make sure you put the control stick right in the middle, otherwise you can accidentally fall down into the Gloomdredger chassis and you're not able to get out. So let's move on to those pulsed beam heads that I showed you earlier. And we're going to use something called the Tako angle. This is a sort of diagonal configuration to the side as well. Before we had it just 45 degrees up, and here you see the trigger head on the right is angled a little bit forward and to the side. So here's how I attach it. I just have it upside down, diagonal to one side, and then look at it kind of from the corner as I attach it. And you want it symmetric. So we see here that the left one is a little bit further, I think, forward than the right one. They're a little bit off. So we're going to attach beams to each of them and see how they compare with their pulses and adjust the other one to whichever one performs better. I'll attach one beam to each and make sure that the beam is somewhat aligned with the aiming head eye. Although, as we've seen, the beams are a little low, so you probably want to attach them higher. And later on in the video, I will address that. So we see that the left beam sometimes is continuous, while the right one pulses great. So we want to match the left construct head to the right one. So I'll head back and readjust that. Right there, and then we'll attach the beams again. And we'll go back out and see how they perform. That's better. So the left one's not continuous really anymore. And they have about the same pulsing rate. Right one still is a little better, but after you get a good configuration, you can add up to like 6 beams or so. You could do 8. But 6 works, and this way we have a little bit of room on the top for the cannons. So with that, let's add the cannons and complete this turret. First, we'll add one more head upside down on top of the aiming one. I'm going to take the whole thing, add a stake it into the ground, and remember, we want a really small angle for this pulsed cannon. So we're gonna take our secondary stake, bring it between the attached stake and the trigger head for the cannons, and we're just gonna nudge it back just slightly because we want a very small angle, like that. Hopefully that will bring it up a little bit. We'll auto build it, and then we'll go test it out. We'll see if we can get some pulsed cannons with this. If we don't, we'll just come back and do that same process again. Hopefully it'll work the next time. Pretty busy turret on the top. That's kind of what the head looks like now. It's gonna look almost like you just snapped it upside down onto the bottom aiming head, but there's just a slight angle to it now. Remember, 2 degrees is hardly noticeable by eye. Attach a cannon to the head of that trigger head, and then we'll go test it out. Vroom. All right, so remember that we did 1 nudge so far. Let's see if this cannon will pulse while we're fighting these people. Looking pretty normal right now, so the angle's pretty much 0. If the angle's too large, it will pulse without shooting any cannonballs out, and if it's too small, it'll just act like a normal cannon. So I've done the same process and I nudged it once more, a little bit further. Still no... Okay, there we go. There's some pulsed cannons. That was a really good one. Wow, okay, so this is a great angle. And yeah, unfortunately, right now, the best advice I can give you is just do 1 nudge at a time, go out and test it, see if you can get some pulse cannons like this, since I don't have like a really standardized way of making it. But as you saw there, a lot of damage. And I need more Zonite, so let's bring the whole thing down and get, I don't know, 200 Zonite or whatever. I've attached the control stick more in the middle here to prevent me from dropping down underneath, like you saw me, because that happened a couple times while I was out fighting people. I took off the cannons too while we're down here, that way I don't knock Zonite away. And remember, the wheel can break the deposits, you don't need that drill. But having these 2 trigger heads is really nice, because they can target multiple enemies. Also, if you accidentally activate it and miss getting off, it's kind of like a, I don't know, a drone of sorts, but it'll hit the wall. So here's how you get on normally. Usually I just try to hit A as quick as possible. That's nice. I love just being able to run over the deposits. Good job. Alright, we got this enemy camp here. And we don't have any cannons. Okay, that left one's a little continuous again. Ooh, that's nice pulsing. Jeez. Whoa, the health bar. Well, it is going for the feet, but man, that damage. And here's drone mode. Help me. Alright, let's fight a Hinox. And this is going to go for the feet, but we'll see what kind of damage it does. Okay. Yeah. Look at that. Couldn't even knock me off. Well, that took it down pretty quick. We know the front wheel can break Zonite deposits, but can it break armor? Okay. That didn't do anything. Let's try a big wind-up. Vroom. Nothing. And it looks like no, it can't head-on. There have been a couple studies that show if you spin the wheel from the side, it will break armor, but head-on, it won't. Also, great example of the enemies not seeing Link. Now that we have our war machine complete, let's test it out versus the floating Colosseum. If you want to see it, check out my most recent video before this one, and it's where I take down the floating Colosseum with this exact tank that I've been showing you how to build throughout the video. The one adjustment that I made was that I added 2 more cannons on either side of the central cannon that I had added before. But other than that, everything's exactly the same. But after this, I still want to get those beams to hit the enemies instead of the floor. So there's one more tweak to do, you know? We're not done. You thought this video was just going to be for what I showed you in the last one. No, I'm going to give you a better tank. I think since this one took a little bit less than 7 minutes and a lot of the lasers weren't hitting, I think if we can get all the lasers hitting the Lionels, then we'll probably do it in under 5. So I've gone through a few iterations for this super turret, and this is actually the 6th one that I ended up on. We're going to start with the beams up a little bit higher. So we're going to start horizontally here, line it up with the cannon trigger head eye, just for some more height. That way we don't hit the ground and we hit the body of the enemies. We'll put the other one on the other side. And then we're just going to stack everything vertically. We'll lose a little bit of accuracy, but we'll hit the enemy's body. Then I'll attach to the regular snap points. We're going vertically so the cannons don't hit the beams. You know, I'm thinking I'm going to use 2 cannons and 8 lasers. On these top ones, let's make it a little bit diagonal, kind of like an arch. But we'll see how it goes. Cannon in the middle there, and then we got our one last angled beam. And there we go. Right. Let's try that. Let's get it. All right, here we go. That was quick. Nice. Excellent. Let's go get him. Come on, cannons. Man, cannons take a long time to get rid of that armor. Almost there. Bada boom! We did it! We did it!